Hello and good morning, everyone. A warm welcome to all of you gathered here. The topic for today is Couture Jewelry as Wearable Art of Bridging the Gap Between Fashion and Fine Art, powered by Innovate Talks. Our first speaker for today is Mr. Milan Chokshi. Mr. Chokshi is the founder of Moksh, a couture jewelry brand established in 2004. His objective was to steer the brand towards the future, preserving its time honored heritage while simultaneously meeting the evolving preferences of the contemporary women. As a culture aesthete, Milan deeply values the transformative influence of self discovery within one's chosen artistic medium. Our next speaker, she is a respected journalist, gemologist, colored stones with Gia, and storyteller known in the gem and jewelry industry for in depth research based work. She's trained as an MBA with a specialization in marketing. She writes on topics related to responsible sourcing, mining, manufacturing and trading, jewelry design and craftsmanship, history, value preservation and appreciation, to name a few. And our last speaker for this session is Mr. Jai Sagar of Astaguru. Jai is Astaguru's jewelry expert. He joined the auction house in 2018 with 21 years of experience already under his belt. Belonging to the fourth generation of the family jewelry business, Jai has honed his skills and has a knack for appraising vintage and estate jewelry. I would now like you all to give a round of applause for all our speakers today. Let's invite them on stage.
Hello, good morning. So I think everyone can hear me clearly, hopefully.
We should check, yes.
Yes, we'll do a quick check. Don't worry, we won't start singing. But thank you so much for taking time out of your very busy schedule at IIJS Signature and joining us this morning as we delve into an important topic of jewelry as wearable art, and how can jewelry transcend and be free of some of this trapped situation that we find ourselves in as an industry, where the intrinsic value of jewelry is more sometimes important than the work of art. And so let's get things going. And I think before we dig deeper, it's important to define what is considered art in the context of jewelry. So I'm going to kick things off with Jai Sagar from Astaguru Auction House. And Jai, you, Astaguru, and you're a jewelry specialist, of course, coming from a jewelry family. And Astaguru does regularly auction jewelry. So tell us what, in your opinion, is considered art, and what are some of the criteria, what is some of the criteria that you adopt when you're assessing a piece of jewelry?
So, good morning, everyone. Coming from a family of jewelers, growing up, I have always seen vintage estate jewelry, and the entire thing that I was taught from a very young age is to see what goes into making that piece. So for us, as you know, art is an expression. So it's ideas, emotions that go into creating something. I can give you one example. We had a pair of vintage bajubans, which was in our auction in 2022, sorry. And the way it was created, the time, the effort, I think that all goes into appraising a piece. For me, personally, that's my opinion, that what goes into it, the story, the collection of the stones. Every stone was Burma no heat, the rubies, the diamonds were finely matched. So for me, that's a piece of art, personally.
So I think the thing that I'm taking away from you is that it was handcrafted. And I think that's an important distinction in what could be considered art. If something is factory produced and volume production is not something that we can say could become a piece of wearable art. So it needs to be something which is handcrafted by an artist or designed by an artist. And that's the takeaway I'm taking from what you're saying. So, and before I move to Milan and, Moksha, I think irrespective of the category or the price point in your collection, every single piece is a work of wearable art. And I have seen the work that you and your team have been doing for many years. So it's a pleasure to have you here. The other thing, before I ask you the same question, I think it's about originality as well. So please, how would you define something as a piece of wearable art in the context of jewelry?
Yeah. Hi, everyone, and thanks for asking me this loaded question. So I don't necessarily think you can put a framework around what art is. And I feel even if someone can replicate something a few times, that doesn't not make it a piece of art. Art is a deeply personal process. What goes into it, as Jai mentioned, the material, the effort, that may be my or our perception of what we've created, but the wearer or someone who's looking at it or someone who's thinking of buying it may not necessarily see it the same way. So I think art, as we see it in other disciplines also of art, it's a very open, very wide kind of subject. I think originality is primary. I think the most important thing, how you communicate your interpretation of what you've created and how that, customer or whoever it is views it, and the setting you put around it and how you kind of package it and place it. Listen, at the end of the day, even modern art or contemporary art or, the masters, the way we see it, there is a commercial angle. Everything is commerce at the end of the day. That's the way I see it. And likewise in jewelry, I think being true, being original is paramount. Of course, all the other elements that go in make it all the more special. But the way it's presented, it's like food. It's not, when you go to a fine dine place, you don't only eat, you also kind of eat with your eyes, with your senses, with all your senses. So same goes for jewelry. I think we need to elevate what we produce and give it that importance ourselves, and then it will be a work of art for someone.
No, and I think from what you're saying, I immediately thought of the Elsa Peretti bone cuff that she designed for Tiffany & Co. And it's, and I think that's one of the traps that when you think of wearable art, you think that it needs to be one of a kind, it needs to be big, it needs to be complicated. And that's not necessarily true because, if you think of the bone cuff, it's just like a simple cuff and more than one of a kind, but it's still considered a work of art.
No, sometimes, sorry,
please go ahead.
People over-intellectualize
yes.
art.
Yes.
Like it becomes almost, prohibitive for an average person to walk into a gallery. So art, like you said, it could be the simplest of things, it could be the most complex thing.
Right. Anything you want to add on that before we move on?
What everyone's saying makes sense. Basically, art is very personal.
Right.
For something tiny, like, I saw a simple Art Deco bracelet. For me, that was art. Tutti Frutti Art Deco bracelet is art.
Right.
The entire amalgamation of colors, stones, simplicity. But
right.
just when worn, it's something that is, it's going to be there for the ages.
But then art is also interpretation. They say beauty lies in the eye of the beholder. And what role does a curator or a journalist versus a patron play in defining what can be considered a work of wearable art? How important then are proportions, symmetry? Is it comfortable? A lot of times I see that people tend to make it like a miniature sculpture, but not necessarily remember that at the end of the way, at the end of the day, a woman or a man or an individual has to physically wear that piece of jewelry on their body and have to be comfortable. So it's not something to lie in a showcase. Thoughts?
I mean, we kind of discussed this when we spoke yesterday.
Yes.
I think the artists sometimes can get overindulgent.
Yes.
And they get so obsessed with the technical or, the art aspect of it, they forget to think that there is someone who has to wear it or put it on their wall. So it can't be obscenely massive, cumbersome to wear, or offensive. I think there is a broad guideline within which all of us can operate. I can't say should operate because who am I to tell anyone?
Yes.
Yeah, but whatever, should operate. Again, like I said, sometimes art is used to kind of put anything out there. So if everyone in at least the jewelry business consciously stayed within certain guidelines and remained kind of focused on thinking about who's wearing it and whether it kind of feels nice, looks nice. I think we'd have achieved a lot as an industry if we end up doing that.
So in terms of guidelines, if you had to focus on, if I put you on the spot and ask you for like maybe 2 or 3 points that you would say could serve as some of those guidelines, what would those be?
I started by saying, who am I to say anything?
Yeah.
So I'll let Jai take this one.
Oh, nice.
No, I mean, see, most important.
Because you're like a referee, right? I'm producing, but you're the auction guru. So
No. See, the sense is for me, again, like you said, it's very personal. I have seen a fair amount of jewelry which honestly is hard to imagine how someone would wear it. So I know what you're saying. But if you had to you can't really put guidelines, unfortunately. You can't say that you can't wear this, you can't wear that. I mean, if you see the type of jewelry the Maharajas wore, if they wore more jewelry than the Maharanis,
Right.
I mean, think about in today's day and age, walking around wearing a Cartier bib necklace to a wedding for a man. You won't really think about that, right?
Oh, give it another 12 to 18 months and we might see that actually. I feel like I'm seeing a lot more jewelry on gentlemen in certain parts of India than I am. They're competing with the brides and nothing wrong with that. I think it's fabulous for the industry. So I'll stick my neck out there as a journalist and try and sort of put forth a couple of points to consider, not necessarily guidelines, but I think as a gemologist, the first thing I learned when I was doing my course with GIA was what holds value over time. And the 3 principles are beauty, durability, and rarity. And I think when we talk about beauty, it's the proportions. Symmetry equals sexy. It's something that a stylist friend of mine once told me. And I think it's something that serves as a guideline to most works of art, whether we consider something made by Leonardo da Vinci or we consider, a ring or a necklace. It's important for it to be symmetrical. It's important for it to be pleasing to the eye for most human beings. And so it needs to be beautiful. It needs to be beautifully crafted. It needs to be comfortable. And one of the things that curators and journalists, the first thing they do is they turn the piece, flip it over to see how is this piece been finished. It needs to be refined. It needs to be well finished. And durability, I think, is linked with that, where it will be durable if it is well made. And the rarity angle comes in from the work of the artist. And I think during the pandemic, for 2 months, I was stuck on this little island known as Singapore and couldn't travel. And in 2022, I just got so tired of not being able to travel. I started literally buying things off WhatsApp and Instagram and getting people to ship them over. And the things that I bought at that time were things which were crafted by artisans. They were artist jeweler pieces. And I gravitated towards that because it just felt like something that was rare and precious and needed to be preserved and needed to be supported at that time. So I think that could be like a nice fundamental principle for people to follow. And this is the problem with sales and marketing people. They don't know when to stop. So I'm playing a dual role as a moderator and a participant here. Let me move on to the next sort of question I have. I got notes here, so bear with me for a second, because I want to make sure I don't miss out anything. Examples from history, are there, or from current times, are there particular artists or moments in history that you think serve as good examples for all of us to reflect on and discuss?
I think it's easy to kind of name the masters, right? So I'm going to avoid doing that.
Please do, yeah.
Yeah. But I think there's, amongst whatever I see in contemporary jewelry design, I think Nikis Koulis is doing some really cool work. I don't know if everyone has seen
the Greek designer.
Yeah,
yes.
I mean, the balance he achieves in his pieces is quite impressive. I think in India, Sajante is doing some fantastic work. I think he's very distinct. His craft is quite nice. Itho Maria in Italy. These are some of the manufacturers that I've seen when I've walked around in shows, and they're more, they're not as big, as the brands, and the brands have the ability to kind of, put a lot of marketing dollars behind what they do. So it, seems. But these are some 3-4 names that come to my mind that are doing some really nice work in India, overseas.
And what, according to you, let's take one of those examples, what according to you makes their work specifically a work of art or a piece of wearable art?
I mean, like I said, we discussed, I think there's balance in just, when you look at it visually, it's just pleasing. There is complexity, and that complexity could be the engineering aspect or the sourcing aspect, like Jai mentioned. Like, they're using stones that are not easy to find. They're cutting them into shapes that are not easy to do. They're working on gold, making it look distinct. And I think the big challenge for jewelry is when someone is wearing a piece of jewelry, it's not always identifiable, and you cannot attribute it to one designer, label, or brand. And I think these guys have managed to do that, where you see that, and you know that, okay, this is Itho Maria, this is Nikis. See, Bhagat, Jar, these are, once in a lifetime cases. So I'm not going to name them, but there are a lot of regular manufacturers and businesses that are doing things in the business which are identifiable.
And I think that's a key point here. And I want to move away from jewelry to maybe a different industry to underline that point. I mean, let's take music, for example. If you hear Taylor Swift, or you hear Eminem, or you hear even the Indian artists, you hear Mika or Badshah, like straight away from the first note, you know who that is. And I think that's a key to their success, that they are clearly identifiable. They have carved a place and, contributed to the language of music. And I think that's an important point. Are you bringing something new to the table, or is it just the same old thing that is being regurgitated and presented?
I must mention Sanskriti, who exhibits here.
Yes.
Also, they do a phenomenal job of the way they present their product, and the whole experience. And I would suggest everyone kind of have a look at their booth and the way they've done, presented. I think that comes back to what we started with, that art, A, identifiable, B, the easel you use to kind of present it has to kind of match your effort, right? I mean, your effort doesn't stop at just making a piece and then, all right, let the world kind of understand
So
for
it's like a
themselves.
thumbprint when you think about it. You
Yeah.
know, I mean, you look at a piece of jewelry, for me, like, you know, I'm only going to speak jewelry centric.
Yes, please.
My first experience of jewelry as art was when I went to JAR's exhibition in London. And, you know, it was a dark room, and we were all given torches. And just to go through the pieces of, I mean, I was 19 years old then. But to see the stuff and to understand what goes into creating something like this, the splash of color, the madness, so to say. You know, it kind of, for someone young starting out in the business, just kind of makes you realize that, okay, back in the day, it's always a cookie cutter approach. You have to be crazy. You know, I mean, we're all artists when you think about it in this business. So you have to create, you have to see stuff which is going to leave an impression. And like you rightly said, someone's walking by, you look at that piece of jewelry and you know, yes, this is this person's piece of jewelry.
Absolutely. And I think I want to talk about it. What you both said reminded me of two things. One, I remember doing a similar panel discussion a couple of years ago, and one of the panelists was Mr. Skavia, who is a well-known jewelry designer. And the first thing he said is that a person who is entering this industry and who wants to be successful, they need to be a cultured person. And I was like, what do you mean by a cultured person? You know, go to museums, read, study, and, you know, immerse yourself into art in all shapes and forms, not necessarily only jewelry, you know, transcending that. And I thought that was a very valuable lesson. And the second thing I want to talk about is, and it's also a journey. It's not something that you can wake up and just be creative on day one. I mean, even for Cartier, before Cartier became Cartier, you know, they started out copying Peter Carl Fabergé, you know, traveling to Russia and literally hiring the same workmaster to create things which today, when you look at them, you would say, oh my God, this is a copy of Fabergé. This is not quote-unquote inspired by Fabergé. No, this is a copy of Fabergé because they went and hired the same workmaster. It was a journey even for Cartier to get, and Cartier became Cartier or started becoming Cartier and being recognized as that artist when they, the brothers realized and started creating pieces which brought their original voice to the table. And of course, as we all know, India had a huge role to play in that. So did other, other royal families, the patronage of the royal families. And let's talk about the patron now. What is the role of a patron in helping a jeweler or an artist sort of elevate their craft? Is there a role that a patron can play?
I mean, absolutely, right? There's no question. I mean, we have, in today's times, we have paid patrons, and then we have those that work for fresh air and love. And even in the art world, there are gallerists that kind of make it easy for someone who is interested to kind of, you know, view the art. And they create an environment and the necessary information for someone to take a decision. So I think there is a role in the jewelry business, for sure, for someone with knowledge and exposure to come in and guide and assist someone who is looking to get something for a particular reason, whether it be investment, whether it be something memorable, emotional, or something that they want to keep for, you know, generations, which is, you know, I think a cliched way to sell jewelry that this is great for the next generation. But there are people who could add value by giving that, you know, dimension, a different dimension, which the average consumer doesn't understand. Unfortunately, the consumer is only looking at breakdowns. And to help someone kind of step back and look at it objectively, look at it for what it is and not for what's, look at the painting and not the quality of the paint and paint brush. I think there's certainly a role. And someone like you who has done a, you know, a fabulous job. Send me my $100.
Fine, I'll send you, and you can send me Mutual Admiration Society. So anything that you'd like to add, Jay? What about the role of like storytelling and marketing in this?
for me, like every piece of jewelry has a story. So
Yes.
we do, vintage jewelry. You never know what you're going to be seeing. I mean, I've had mornings when I've gone to the office having no clue, what I'm going to see. I mean, I can give this one really
Please.
ridiculous story. This old lady came to us, we're an auction house, Asta Guru, and she's an old client of ours. And she came, she showed a piece of jewelry. She came by bus from really far. And when I opened it up, I wasn't sure of what it was because it was dusty. So I had it cleaned. And when I actually saw it, it was an old Golconda stone, which she had no clue of. So it was a 11-carat stone mounted by, I think, an old Indian jeweler. We couldn't really determine who it was. And when I told her the value, she actually sat down and said, I don't think I'll take the bus home. I said, no, I'll drop you home, So you don't need to, we did a value, we did a private sale for her. So you never know what you're going to find, And it's, again, what I understood later is there was a person in the community who was like a patron. So she would buy the jewelry